Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of the In the Clutch podcast. My name is Drew Clutchy, and I'm here alongside my co-host, Jeremy Wilson. And today we're here to predict the NBA All-Star teams. Who you got in the Eastern Conference, Jared? Let's hear it.
Starting backcourt, I think this is probably the most set in stone of any of the positions other than maybe the front court for the Eastern Conference of DeMar and Trae Young.
You know what? I'll back that up. That's what I've got written on my page, too. So I think DeMar DeRozan, self-explanatory. He's having a phenomenal season, especially one of the best in his career since basically he was in Toronto because he spent so much time in San Antonio, essentially dormant, right?
Right.
But he was out there just honing his craft, which is incredible because I think it's hard when you're in a situation like DeMar was. He was a multi-time All-Star, building things up in Toronto, getting better and better. And then to be sent off to a team that's just floating around 500 and essentially forgotten for a few years, especially you're kind of out in Texas. Not San Antonio's not a small market, but they're not super huge. So to be able to keep working on your basketball skills, he improved so much as a passer in his time in San Antonio, and essentially just wait till your contract runs out and then be able to come and be I wouldn't go as far to say an an MVP candidate, but to make yourself again an all-star starter. I think that's huge, and it says a lot about DeMar DeRozan's work ethic.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Toronto, where he was a starter, I'm sure a few years, and then it seemed like the game almost like he became almost outdated because he couldn't shoot and he was big on mid-range
Right.
jumpers, and so it seemed like the game had kind of passed him by, and he was forever going to be a above average, mediocre, really player.
Right.
And to come back and be an all-star starter again is really kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then Trae Young averaging 28 and 9.5. I don't think there's much.
Well, that's exactly it. Especially the Eastern Conference backcourt is relatively weak, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think even DeMar DeRozan, I would go as far, saved the Eastern Conference backcourt because I think he's a front court player. Because if you look at Chicago's lineup, you've Lonzo Ball, Zach Levine, DeMar DeRozan.
Right.
So,
and if you looked at San Antonio's lineup, you would have seen him small forward, power forward. He really hasn't played shooting guard since Toronto.
Exactly. But I guess if you ask a lot of casual NBA fans, right, that's what probably they'd see DeMar DeRozan as.
Right.
And not to compare DeMar DeRozan to Michael Jordan, obviously. Like Michael Jordan, also not like a great 3-point shooter, could get to the rim like there's no tomorrow, great mid-range shooter, 6'6", super strong shooting guard.
I actually think DeMar DeRozan is like possibly a little bit taller than Michael Jordan, and really, like you said, all the same attributes to Michael Jordan. So probably maybe the greatest player of all time. But
well, no, let's not start a debate here. Let's not start a rumble. But yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people probably see him as a shooting guard. But if you look at the way Chicago is made up, I think he's clearly a front court player. So I don't know how the NBA came across that decision because they get to dictate. I've heard to members of the media and coaches, the NBA has just dictated who's backcourt and who's front court. You can't slide people around this year and adjust to make your voting system fit for you personally.
Right. And I mean, like the basketball reference page has him listed as a power forward this year and a power forward last year and a small forward the year before that. It's 2018-19 is the last time they have him listed as a shooting guard. But again, if he wasn't a backcourt player, he probably wouldn't be starting. So I'm sure he doesn't mind.
Right. Yeah. I think the backcourt, I think you hit it bang on. I think in the Eastern Conference, especially, it's fairly self-explanatory. And even in the Western Conference, I think when we get to that point, the backcourt will be pretty clear as well. So no debate there. So then I'm going to hit the Eastern Conference front court.
Yep.
So honorary mention, although I guess it's not very honorary because it's pretty clear, Kevin Durant.
Right.
So I don't think Kevin Durant will be in the All-Star game. He is now injured. I believe it's an MCL, which I've heard MCL heals faster because there's more blood flow to your MCL than it is your ACL. Huh. So if you're going to have an injury in your knee, apparently, and like Dr. Drew's amateur health hour to rip off Zach Lowe here. So that's not that I'm by any means educated on the topic, but my understanding is that your MCL will heal faster than an ACL, so it's a shorter injury. But I still don't think Kevin Durant will be back for the All-Star game.
Yeah, I agree. I have him as a front court starter, but I have an extra forward at the very end of my list of All-Star reserves to replace Kevin Durant on that list.
What an incredible season for Kevin Durant. 29.3 points, 7.4 boards, almost 6 assists, over 52% field goals, and 37% from three.
Yeah,
like that's a monster
incredible
season.
Yeah,
And just over 36 minutes too.
Yeah, and if he wasn't hurt for a month and a half, I'm sure he would be among the top 3 in MVP voting when the season finishes. But
which you could still, I think you could still argue he is, or he will be.
I think if you
because the other thing too is he's almost a 90% from the free throw line.
Yeah,
Kevin Durant, he's the most efficient player.
If you miss 30% of the season, how are you going to argue that it's not more valuable for Steph Curry to play 100% of the games than it's for Kevin Durant to play 70%?
Which I suppose that's true.
Would you rather have Steph Curry for 82 games or Kevin Durant for 58 games?
Wait, can I have Gary Trent for all the games?
Yes, you can replace either of them with
so
Gary
there we
Trent.
go. So then that's that. But I think now to go on the next step. So I'm assuming Kevin Durant's not going to play. I'd have him obviously as an all-star starter. He's top 5 in the MVP MVP discussion wherever you choose to put him.
Yeah.
So not necessarily the next best front court player, but the player I have replacing Kevin Durant. I have in the front court replacing Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum. So I have him. He's 25 points per game, almost 9 boards, almost 4 assists, 85% from the free throw line on just awful shooting percentages. He's like 41% field goal, 31% from 3.
Yeah.
So obviously we were hoping to see more of a jump from Jason Tatum. And to me, Jason Tatum fails the eye test because whenever I watch Jason Tatum, it's a lot of late in the shot clock shots, contested deep twos, mid-range shots, off the dribble, step backs in the mid-range. But nonetheless, he is leading the Celtics, putting up 25 points per game. I was surprised that he was almost at 9 boards because I never think of him as a big rebound player.
Right.
And then the other thing too is he does have a steal, 1 steal per game and almost a block.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference front court as to who could replace Kevin Durant, I think Tatum makes the most sense, even with his awful shooting splits.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the All-Star deals with injuries in terms of the starting lineup. Obviously, they're replaced by a different player. I don't know if they'll still announce Kevin Durant as an All-Star starter or not.
Right.
I didn't have anybody replacing him in the starting lineup. I had just a reserve at the very end of my list to replace Kevin Durant.
Right.
But I would probably agree that if there's that slot in the starting lineup, Tatum would fill it.
Yeah. And I think given the Eastern Conference front court, that's what made the most sense to me. I think, especially along with Celtics fans, we were all really hoping to see a jump from Jason Tatum this year.
Yeah.
Into really a superstar player because he's kind of just floating around still the all-star level.
Right. And we saw a stretch of basketball last year where he was just incredible. And he looked like this could be like soon one of the top 5 to 10 players in the NBA. And he could be realistically possibly the best player on a championship team. And we've just not seen that this year.
And it'll be interesting to see if he ever actually does get there or if we've kind of reached, other than let's say the percentages get a little bit better. But if at 25 points per game, we're already seeing the best of Jason Tatum.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to wonder if he kind of peaked and people figured him out. And now he's regressed until he gets a better number 1 option for him.
Well, and especially too, if he finds a point guard, like a real point guard, not like a Marcus Smart or like a Dennis Schroeder, like even somebody like, I know we were talking about in our chat earlier this week, like somebody like Spencer Dinwiddie. Like, doesn't have to be an all-star point guard, but just a player who actually is a typical
a shot
point guard distributor.
Guard. Yeah.
So if he can find somebody like that, then you might see his shot, like you might see his looks improve. He might start taking more efficient shots.
Right.
Because I think, like I said, he fails the eye test for me. And I think that's a lot of what's dragging him down is the fact that he doesn't take great shots.
Right. And I mean, there are other players similar to DeRozan who was efficient from the mid-range, but in terms of eye test, you would say that's a bad shot. Probably a decent amount of time with somebody like DeRozan.
Right. But DeRozan's elitely efficient at it.
Right. So, yeah, it's not really dependent on because we wouldn't say a thing if he was shooting 48% of the field on all the same shots.
Right.
So, in terms of shot selection, I haven't watched a ton of Jason Tatum this year, but there are multiple players, I think, with similar shot selection that are just doing it way more efficiently.
Right. But wow, does Jason Tatum ever have the potential? Because he's still super young. So does he ever have the potential in the coming years to turn into a really elite player, just the way his body's built and with the talent he has?
Yeah. And so moving on to the rest of the Eastern Conference front court starters, I think we'll both agree on these two as well, with Giannis and Embiid as locks in the front court. Again, Giannis is top 3 to 5 in the MVP race, and Embiid is, I'm not sure where he would rank in terms of MVP type conversation, but he's for sure a top 3 Eastern Conference forward or something.
Oh, absolutely. Giannis is just incredible. When you look at I'm going to pull Giannis' stat line here. 28.6 points, 11.3 boards, 6 assists on 53% from the field, 28% from 3, which is Giannis, so that's about to be expected. And he's 71% from the free throw line this year with a steal and 1.5 blocks.
Yeah, and that's absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, Joel Embiid's really stepped up this year too. He's got basically 28.5, 10.5, and is shooting almost 40% from 3. And what more can you ask for from your center than dominant scorer, rebounder, and shooting high efficiency from the field and from 3?
Well, and the other thing too is you can't foul Embiid because Embiid's 82% from the free throw line.
Right. So it's not like he's a late game liability like even Giannis can be at times.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's like 81% from the free throw line is super solid, because that means if he shoots up to 20 free throws in the game, right, he's hitting so many of them that's a lot of points you're giving up. And you could foul him to the point where he shoots 20 free throws in the game. Like,
right. And just because somebody who's that physically dominant too, it's going to be like, I'm sure Shaq got fouled an absurd amount because of Hack Shaq. And also, like, how do you guard Embiid without fouling him?
You don't.
So if you, as a center like that, just a low post dominant center, if you can't shoot free throws, that's going to be a huge detriment to your game.
Exactly. And when you see it sometimes, like obviously Giannis, the iconic game 6 in the finals where he went like 17 of 19 from the free throw line. Yeah. So that was ultimate Giannis, I would argue, right? Because Giannis is never really going to have a 3-point shot. Like, he's never going to be, Giannis will never be 37% from 3 or something. Right. But even Giannis at 28% from 3, if he's 17 of 19 from the free throw line, that's the ultimate Giannis.
And imagine, like, we see players who it seems like when they're the MVP, they've kind of peaked. They're good at everything they're going to be good at.
Right.
It's basically just age
Russell Westbrook
that's going to stop them. Russell Westbrook. But Giannis, we've seen Giannis win back-to-back MVPs without being able to shoot a 3.
Right.
If he gets to being a slightly below average 3-point shooter, he's still going to be getting better. Like, he's got so much still that he can grow into as a 2-time MVP and Finals MVP.
Well, yeah, and even if you think about it, like if he ups his 3-point percentage 6%, and even if he takes the same number of threes, like let's say his shot selection doesn't change at all, then that's like an extra point per game, maybe for him, right? Like, so now he's not. And now he's not 28.6 points per game. He's 29.6. He's leading the league in points per game if he gets that extra point.
And now suddenly defenses are stepping back from him and letting him shoot threes. They're stepping up, and now it's drive-by dunks.
Or same thing, even if he can get his free throw percentage, like Giannis. And that's to put, like, so I'm a high believer in Giannis, but to put into context how great he is, if he can get his free throw percentage up just that little bit more, like he's only at 71%, he gets a point per game more, and then he's the league leading scorer as well.
Right, and I'm under the belief of Giannis has the possibility of becoming possibly the greatest player of all time. He's 27, I think, with back-to-back MVPs and a Finals MVP, and if he gets 2-3 more of those, then what's stopping him? But obviously,
well, the only thing though is obviously he has to get towards 6 rings. Like whether or not he gets 6 rings is besides the point, but he has to get closer to that because like
you're
1 or 2 is not enough.
At least 3 or 4. Like LeBron, I would argue at 4 least now, 4. Right?
Because LeBron has 4 now, so obviously there's MJ and his squad at 6, and then Shaq and Kobe,
right, with 5,
And then there's a whole bunch of people at 4.
Although Shaq doesn't have 5. Shaq has 3, I think.
Shaq
or 4.
4. He got one. Didn't he get one with D Wade?
Yeah, he got one with D Wade in 06, I think.
So D Wade is
1, 2, 3, 3.
4.
3.
D Wade is 4, doesn't he? Well,
No.
But you got to be at least.
Wait. Back to back in Miami, and then one with Shaq in 06.
Right.
I think that's it. Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna verify that stat here just to make sure we're on the same page. Yeah, D Wade is 3.
Right.
So LeBron's a 4.
Yeah.
And now because obviously the conversation essentially revolves around MJ and LeBron. So you at least have to be at 4 now. Because we can't argue LeBron's like getting to 6, I don't think, because LeBron's done so many other things in his career. I don't think it's about necessarily getting to 6. You at least got to be at 4.
Right, but I mean, LeBron has 4 MVPs. Michael Jordan has 5 MVPs. Giannis already has 2. So what if Giannis gets 6 MVPs or 5 MVPs?
Yeah, but how many? If he's at 2 rings, then to me that doesn't hold enough water.
I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see. But
okay,
anyway.
So quote Jeremy Wilson: Giannis is the best player ever now because he's already won some MVPs.
Anyway, we can. Do you want to do the Western Conference stars or the rest of the Eastern Conference?
We'll keep it linear. We'll stick Eastern Conference reserves.
Okay.
We'll take turns. We'll go one each.
Sure. You want to start with guards? Like you do one guard, I'll do the other guard.
Sure, we'll go for that.
Yeah.
Fred VanVleet.
I have Fred VanVleet later on my list. So
we're going in order.
Officially, I have. Well, there's the Eastern Conference starters, and then you need 2 guard reserves, 3 forward reserves, and then 2 reserves of any position.
Right.
So I have VanVleet in the 2 reserves of any position.
Which that's category. What I had Fred VanVleet as an all-star reserve just in the guard slot.
Right.
I didn't realize, are they weighted by position?
As it comes to all-star reserves, you need at least 2 guards and at least 3 forwards, and then 2 of anything.
No, but like, are they weighted in terms of like whether or not are the 2 any at the end?
The 2 any are not weighted by position. Like it doesn't matter what position they're.
Right, are they weighted by order? I guess. Like, does it matter that they're lower on the order?
I don't think so, but I just did it in that kind of order.
Interesting. Anyway, so I have Fred VanVleet. I think he's having an awesome season. He's playing 40 minutes or 38 minutes per game this season. 22 points, 4.7 rebounds, 6.9 assists, 39.8% from 3, 87% from the free throw line, 1.7 steals per game.
Yeah, and trust us in terms of we watch quite a bit of Raptors, and you really do have to see VanVleet to realize how incredible he is and how much the Raptors lean on his offense.
That's exactly it. He's very underrated amongst the American markets because nobody watches Raptors basketball in the States.
Right.
And especially now that this American teams aren't sending their best players up because they don't want them to get trapped in Canada because of COVID. Now, really, nobody's watching the Raptors, and there's no fans in the Scotiabank Arena. So, Fred VanVleet is at a real disadvantage in terms of the All-Star game. But I think not only, like you said, like when you watch the Raptors, the eye test speaks for itself. I think his stats do as well.
Yeah, and the combination of the offensive stats you listed, and he has the potential to be an all-NBA caliber defender. I don't see how you can not have VanVleet as an All-Star.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a no-brainer for me. Hit us with who you've got next. Who's your next All-Star guard in the East?
I have Zach Levine as an All-Star reserve.
Okay.
He is, scoring at a high clip like he always does.
Right.
Just Zach Levine type numbers at 25 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and shooting 41% from 3 and almost 50% from the field.
Right.
So scoring efficiently on one of the best, if not the best teams in the Eastern Conference.
Right.
Hard to argue with that.
I'm going to argue with that, though. I'm going to try my best. I have James Harden at that spot.
I have James Harden as a All-Star reserve guard as well.
So James Harden, 23 points per game, 8.1 rebounds, 10 dimes. So he's a double-double player.
Yep.
42% from the field, which isn't great, but not terrible. 34% from three, 86.6% from the line, and actually 1.3 steals per game.
Yeah, so, that's a surprisingly high number.
Yeah, so if we assume that we're ranking them in order here down the All-Star list, then I have James Harden at that.
Well,
next
if we're
All-Star
ranking
spot.
them in order, did you have Van Fleet ahead of Harden?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not trying to argue with you on Harden though. I have Harden in my second spot too.
Right.
But
okay,
I have Van Fleet. I would then argue Zach Levine over Fred Van Fleet.
Interesting.
Instead of James Harden.
Yeah. So I've got Harden. Harden's having a great year, and frankly, Brooklyn's winning. Yeah, so Brooklyn I think I've heard a lot of debate amongst the NBA community about whether or not like Harden's an All-Star or where he ranks in the All-Star voting. And to me, right. I think that's also a no-brainer pick because he's almost a triple-double on a winning team. So put aside whether or not you like Harden or like his style of play, he's still an All-Star.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to, with somebody with those stats on a winning team, tough to make an argument that they aren't an All-Star, even if they're playing with other superstar players like Durant.
Exactly. Okay, so hit us with your first forward, Jer.
My first forward, if we don't include Jason Tatum, who we've already talked about,
right,
would be Jimmy Butler, averaging about 21, 6, and 6 on the third best team in the Eastern Conference right now. And I think it's clear that he's their go-to player.
Right.
So just the caliber of winner that I think Jimmy Butler is, and along with 21, 6, and 6 is, nothing to sneeze at. I think he should be a lock as a reserve at least.
Did Jimmy Butler miss a lot of games this year, I thought?
Jimmy Butler has played 28 games this year. I think
that's not bad.
He
missed about 10 then.
40 to 45.
Yes. Oh, right. So I guess we're just over the halfway point. Yeah. So I guess he's missed 10 to 15 games because I don't have Jimmy Butler on my list, but I feel like now I'm sleeping on Jimmy Butler. Or maybe not. Okay. So I'm going to give you another forward. We'll see how I can round out my list here. So I have Miles Bridges as one of the forwards. So I
didn't even have Miles Bridges in consideration.
Really?
So
I don't know. I watch a lot of Hornets basketball. I'm a big Lamela fan. So Miles Bridges, 20 points per game, 7.5 boards, almost 4 assists, 48% from the field, 33% from three, 1.1 steals and a block.
Right.
So I gave him a reserve spot. I think he's having a good year. And Charlotte is technically above 500, but obviously they don't have close to the same record that Miami does.
Right. And I haven't watched a whole bunch of Hornets basketball, and you see highlights of the Hornets and it's mostly just alley-oops to Miles Bridges, which is all
he is more than that as a player though. He's actually a decent catch and shoot three. Like Miles Bridges also passes the eye test of when he is a hot night, the Hornets do really well.
Right. And I was totally unaware that he was a 20 point per game kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I would still say that Jimmy Butler, in terms of stats, I think are better, and winning, I think would be better too.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And I forget too, I tend to be a really numbers focused person, but I don't necessarily value winning the same way that everybody else does.
Right.
Because a lot of it's out of your control. Oh, I guess some would argue that if you're a great player, you will win. But if your team has a lot of injuries or your team's just not built properly around you, like look at Bradley Beal, right? Bradley Beal is a phenomenal basketball player. He just hasn't had a great team.
Right. And I know Bradley Beal averaged like 28 points per game one year and did not make the All-Star team.
Yeah, which is just crazy. So that's what I mean.
He led the NBA in scoring and didn't make the All-Star team, I think. So
to me, you can only put so much on winning.
Right.
Because it's out of your control if you have an awful team around you and you're not LeBron James.
It's like obviously 2007 LeBron dragging teams to the finals.
Well, that's exactly it. So if you're not LeBron James, but like Bradley Beal leading the league in scoring, not making the All-Star team. Right. So I think sometimes and it's the same for me in the MVP conversation. There's a little bit too much value placed on winning, but then I'm also biased towards the numbers. I put a lot of value on that, which I understand as well. I need to look at the eye test more, which I try to do now.
Right.
So it just depends on how you look at it, right?
Right.
So that as the next forward, I've got the big man. I got Jared Allen. So Jared Allen, 16 points per game, 11 rebounds, 2 assists on almost 70% from the field, 68% from the free throw line, and also adding 0.8 steals and 1.4 blocks.
Right. And I think Jared Allen is having a fantastic year. I didn't have him. I had him technically one spot lower than you did. I have
Right.
him as my reserve replacing Kevin Durant in
Right.
terms of the injury. So he's my last man in
Right.
terms of the Eastern Conference. But I do have him as an all-star, and I think he's having the best year of his career after I was pretty questionable about the Cavs signing him for $100+ million.
The other thing which I'm biased to as well is the All-Star game is in Cleveland this year.
Gotta get a Cavalier in
Gotta
there.
get so in terms of, I guess I'm counting in the fan vote on this. We got to get a Cleveland Cav
Right.
on the court. So I think Jared Allen's having an all-star season. Obviously, it's hard if you're not like an elite big man. It's hard to average like more assists or anything, get closer to a triple double.
Right.
But same thing in terms of the eye test, what he does on the defensive end of the floor is just insane, guarding
Yeah.
other elite big man and also being the help defender in the lane.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jared Allen is having an awesome season and is a really, really good defensive player.
So then who's your final forward?
My final forward is Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, I've got Siakam as well.
And I was actually sleeping on Siakam as a Raptors fan because I wasn't even thinking about putting him in the All-Star game until I was looking at the fan returns and I saw that he was pretty high up in terms of front court voting in the Eastern Conference. And I went to look at his stats, and he's actually averaging 21, just over 8 and 5.
Right.
And doing it on decent efficiency. And so it's hard to say that a player like that shouldn't be an all-star, especially when the Eastern Conference reserves, like, it doesn't run that deep in terms of great forwards.
Right. No, I completely agree. Everything you said is bang on. No debate for me. I've got Siakam as that last in the forward spot. So then for the two positionless players where we can assign any player of any position, I have Lamela Ball as my first one in. Like I said, I'm a big Lamelo fan. I watch a lot of Hornets basketball, but he's 19 points per game, 7 boards, 8 assists, 37% from 3, 88% from the free throw line, and 1.6 steals as well.
Yeah, I didn't know he was up there in steals like that. I have Van Fleet as my first positionless all-star. I have LaMelo as my second one, so no argument on that. I think there will be a lot of guards in the Eastern Conference. I don't have any forwards in my two positionless reserve spots. But.
I think the interesting thing is LaMelo Ball is a really, I'm going to say this sparingly. He's a really complete player, which because he's so big in size, he can get a lot, and he's a phenomenal passer. He can get a lot of assists easily. He gets a lot of boards. So he's always a triple-double threat.
Right.
But then the interesting thing is his defense is weird because he's not traditionally a good defender. He gambles a lot.
Right.
And because he's young and he has long arms and he's fast, he gets a lot of steals. So that's not going to fare well for him when he needs to learn how to really win in the NBA and become a good elite defender. So I'm not going to say LaMelo is a good traditional defender, but as a young guard trying to figure the league out, he gambles a lot and it looks good on him right now.
Right. And I mean, he's obviously a good scorer. He shoots with decent percentages and he's a great passer. I remember watching him as a rookie and thinking like, wow, that like he makes incredible passes at times. Right. So yeah, I have no argument to LaMelo as an all-star.
Right. So then who's your last Eastern Conference all-star?
My last Eastern Conference all-star, I think we've covered all of them. I had Jared Allen as the final reserve.
Right. So I still have one player. Oh, because you said who your last man in was already, because I moved Tatum up.
Right. So who's your last man in then?
So you picked 13 people, right?
Yes.
Because you had like the Kevin Durant and then the last man in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had Kevin Durant and then I just replaced him with Jason Tatum in the starting lineup. So as my last player, I have Kyrie Irving. Because I think A, it'd be hilarious to see Kyrie Irving on the All-Star court in Cleveland.
And but B, if you cannot put Kyrie Irving on the All-Star court in Cleveland.
I think it'd be so funny. Kyrie Irving has played 6 games. I was debating between him and Ben Simmons, but I ultimately went with Kyrie Irving. He's played 6 games. But what I find incredible about Kyrie Irving is he's 22, 5, and 5 with a steal, and his free throw percentage is 100, which obviously can't beat that. Only 6 games. But I think what's incredible about Kyrie Irving is he was a 50, 40, 90 last year, and he's picked up pretty much his shooting's been a little bit lower than traditional, like just a little bit. He's 0.496 for field goal percentage and 36 on threes. But he's almost a 50, 40, 90 player given all the time he's missed, and he just walked back out in the middle of the season.
Yeah, almost a 54 and 90 player. You know how many free throws he shot?
8. I don't know, 5. Oh, 8. There we go.
He shot 33 threes and hit 12 of them. You cannot have a player who's played less than half the season in the All-Star game. Same reason I don't have Clay in the All-Star game, which I'm sure you do.
But... No, I don't have Klay Thompson. That'd be funny, though. I just think it'd be hilarious to see Kyrie Irving on the floor in Cleveland. But then that brings forth an interesting question. How many games do you have to play to be in the All-Star game? Like, should Bam Adebayo be in the All-Star game? He's played 22 games, I believe. I'll just double check that as we talk here. For anybody who's interested, it is Sunday, January 23rd, as we are recording this podcast. So just to give you some time frame references to how many games players have played. Well, so Bam Adebayo's played 21 games, but he's 18 and 10.
And neither of us picked him as an All-Star, so that doesn't impact our decisions right now. The lowest player I have in terms of games played, I believe, is Jimmy Butler at 28.
But what's the games played threshold? How many games do you have to play to be considered an All-Star? Half the season?
Half the season.
So if you've played half the games, you're an All-Star.
Well, not necessarily, because I'm sure there are lots of players who've played half the games.
If you've played half the games and you're in the All-Star conversation, that's okay.
Yes.
Because obviously, I'm not going to seriously argue that Kyrie Irving at 6 games is like All-Star caliber in terms of statistics. But I think it brings
doesn't even have All-Star caliber statistics.
Well, he's not. Yeah, his percentages are decent, I guess. But like, I think it brings forth an interesting point of then, is it literally like 22 games, I guess, is approximately half for the average team at this point. So there's 22 games enough to be considered an All-Star. And then if so, justify why 22.
I don't have a justification for why 22. I know 6 is not enough. And that's all that matters.
But let's say if Kevin Durant had only played 17 games, would you make Kevin Durant an All-Star? If he had the stats he has right now, but he'd only played 17.
No.
But if he had 22, you would?
No, I feel like I was skeptical about 28. But decided I thought Jimmy Butler was good enough to make.
Because I find that brings forth, and that's what makes the voting so interesting to me. And we'll really have to see what the NBA wants to do in terms of how they decide, like how we replace Kevin Durant and how we're going to replace injured players in general, because games played takes such an important factor.
Right.
Because somebody can have incredible stats, but or all-star level stats to be the last player in or whatever. But it just depends on if they've played enough games for that to be considered valid.
Right. And you could also argue it had to be closer to 2/3 or 3/4, because you're not going to make somebody the MVP with 60 games played.
Well, I think we're getting closer and closer. I wouldn't do it now, but I think we're getting closer and closer to that becoming a reality with so much load management. And especially because a lot of the seasons have been compressed with COVID, because we're trying to like slot in games that have been postponed and all that. So I think we're getting closer
every star
to an
player
MVP
gets
playing
COVID,
60 games.
Then if every star player misses 2 weeks, then you're going to have to do something like that. But again,
I think now that we've seen so many things that are quote unquote COVID specific, with having to reschedule games and make the end of the season a lot denser, I think the NBA players will want to keep that. Not necessarily the dense schedule, but once it becomes normalized to be an MVP at 64 games played, I think the NBA players will keep that as normal.
Right. And I understand that, but I'm not sure we're going to get to that point.
I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes for sure. So then I'm going to boot us off with the Western Conference All-Stars. Western Conference backcourt, to me, was the most clear decision in the whole All-Star thing. I think both in terms of watching these teams play and then also just statistically, both of these players are doing phenomenally well. I have Steph Curry, John Morant.
Yep, I'm 100% with you there. With the surprise that the Grizzlies have been, and with John Morant being their clear star player, I don't think you can argue that John Morant doesn't deserve to be an All-Star starter this year, even though Luka may have overall better stats than he does.
Right. The Grizzlies are number 1 in the NBA power rankings now.
Really?
Yeah. Well, they're really, really solid, and they played the Warriors, must be a week or two ago now, and they took a win in Golden State. Well, I guess it was over a week ago because we talked about it last week on the pod, but like, well, they looked really solid.
That was a win in Memphis, I think.
Yeah, and where John Morant flexed on like a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm not going to forget that.
John Morant found a kid in a Steph Curry jersey and stared him down.
Yeah, I'll talk about that every week on the pod because that was incredible to me.
But yeah, John Morant, again, has about 25, 7, and 6. And on better efficiency than Luka's, averaging his 25, 9, and basically 9.
Well, and frankly, on a winning team.
And I'm sure the Mavericks are a winning team as well. But
a more winning team.
On a really, really good and very surprising team. And John Morant should win most improved player too, I think.
Well, and the scary thing with John Morant is I have him in the MVP conversation. Can you win most improved and MVP in the same season? Or if you go from being a borderline all-star to winning MVP, does that just make you a shoe-in for most improved?
Yeah, I think if you go from a non-all-star, I don't think he was an all-star last year, to winning an MVP, I think, or even in an MVP conversation, I don't know how you're not the most improved player. I know Miles Bridges is in there too, but
Memphis, for reference, Memphis is 32-16, and Dallas is 26-20. So it's a pretty significant gap. Yeah. 6 games.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the Memphis, I think, is the 3 seed right now to Phoenix and Golden State, and the Mavericks are probably closer to 7.
Which, frankly, I'm just going to say it. I still have Golden State to win the championship. Draymond's been out. Klay Thompson's come back, and they've been in a whole shifting of positions and all that. But it's just Phoenix. Phoenix is 36-9. Golden State is 33-13. Phoenix has won 80% of their games this year. Like in the Western Conference, if you had to rank it, like I said, I'm still going to pick Golden State to win the championship. But who's the best team, frankly, in the whole NBA right now? Because Brooklyn's 29-16 and they're leading the East.
Right.
It is Phoenix. Phoenix is the best team currently at this exact moment in the NBA.
And I know this isn't exactly what we're talking about right now, but I've watched a couple Suns games recently, and it just seems like if they're in a close game, late in the game, it's going to be a Suns win. I know.
Well, it's because Chris Paul's going to score 6 points at the free throw line, doing the rip through to get the foul.
I was watching Suns Raptors, and I think the Raptors were up 2 or so with 4 or 5 minutes left, and the Suns scored to tie it, and I went, "This game's all but over," because there's no way the Suns, like a team with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and just well coached, well executed, is going to lose a game like this to a young Raptors team. And same thing, they were playing the Mavericks a couple days ago and tie game late in the fourth quarter, and that's it. Like the Suns are just so good in the clutch that
it's a wrap. Which I need to study that because in the clutch in 2K, I am awful. Like if it is a close game, I got to be up by like 8 in the fourth quarter because it's a close game. I've lost. Like it's done. I might as well just like drop the controller and walk away.
And I mean, Steph Curry is at this point such a lock. We haven't even really discussed him. We're like, yeah, Steph Curry, good.
Well, and people talk about Steph Curry as if he's not insanely, elitely impressive because he's down to like 26 points per game now, and he had some rough shooting nights. But you have to keep in mind, Steph Curry's double teamed every time he touches the ball.
Yeah.
So he's 26.
Sorry, go ahead.
He's 26 points per game with 2 guys guarding him 24/7. Like he like wakes up in the morning, there's 2 guys at his bedside. Like we're already like, we're getting warmed up, man. We're guarding you tonight. Like, so he's 26 points per game, given that that's what's happening to him.
Right. And he is having the worst 3-point shooting season of his career, shooting well above league average from 3.
Right. Which is,
on a ridiculous amount of attempt, on shooting 13 per game, probably 12 of them heavily contested.
Yeah. So like Steph Curry is for me, and that's what made the Western Conference backcourt so easy for me, is it's just Steph Curry is such a lock.
Right. And I'm sure we can go to the front court. I'm sure we both have 2 locks there. We might disagree on the third player. LeBron Jokic.
Give me the 2 locks. Give me the 2 locks.
Yeah. LeBron Jokic, for sure. No question. And then I have Paul George in my third slot.
Justify it. Let's hear it.
I was looking at Andrew Wiggins. I know he's higher in All-Star voting in terms of fan voting, although Warriors fans seem to always show out for that. They almost got Zaza Pachulia in an All-Star game.
Right.
But let me see if I can pull up Paul George's stats, because I know I did before. And he's averaging something like, I'll double check this, but 27, 8, and 6 on good efficiency.
Right.
So I was a little bit high on the 27. It's about 25, 7, and 5.5 shooting on a relatively low shooting splits, but like Jason Tatum kind of deal.
Right. Which it's hard to consistently, which obviously the great players do it, I guess, but it's hard to consistently have great shooting splits year in and year out. And obviously for both Tatum and Paul George, they could turn their shooting splits around this year. Like it's not set in stone.
Yeah. And so I just didn't see a argument from a numbers point of view to put somebody like Andrew Wiggins or Draymond Green in over him. But who do you have at that third spot?
It's interesting. I did go with Draymond Green, which if he doesn't get back on the court, it'll be harder to justify that as the weeks go on here. Because at this point, he's played 34 of approximately 42 games or 44 games. So that's not that bad. Like we just talked about, like he's more than half decently. He's into 30 games now. 7.9 points, which is remarkably low because Draymond. But at the same time, 7.6 boards, 7.4 assists, 54% from the field, 1.4 steals, 1.2 blocks. And just the effect he has, as we've seen, the Warriors have gone into a huge slide since Draymond Green's been out. So the effect he has on both sides of the ball, both in distributing for Steph and soon to be Steph and Clay, and then also to anchor the defense and play the 5 in clutch minutes and guard guys like Giannis and Jokic and just makes winning happen for the Warriors.
Yeah, and I think he's currently the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year.
Exactly.
And you can't argue with the impact that Draymond has and how really good he is. It's just so tough to say. Like if I'm looking at the rest of the All-Stars, the lowest in points per game is like 24, and then it's like, yeah, but this guy who's averaging under 8 can make the All-Star starter.
Well, and on an awful 3-point percentage too. So I'm ultimately still looking at the list. I'm going to stick with Draymond Green. I'm confident in that choice. The only thing that would alter that for me is, like I said, if we're 52 games into the year and Draymond still hasn't played and he's at 34 games and everybody else is caught up or played 44 games, then I think I could definitely see him being bumped down to a reserve spot from there. But at this point, given the exact standings and statistics as is today, I'm comfortable leaving him in the starting spot.
Right. And I have no real issue with that. It's tough to do for me, averaging 7.9 points.
Right.
Anyway, in the backcourt, I would assume you have Luka and a Phoenix Sun. So which Phoenix Sun do you have there?
Which Phoenix Sun do I have? I have Chris Paul.
I have Devin Booker.
What? So I have Chris Paul. So Chris Paul has 14 points, 10 assists. So he's a double-double.
Yeah.
48% from the field, 85 from the free throw line, and 2 steals.
Yeah, and Chris Paul is awesome. He is a great point guard, a great clutch player. But Devin Booker is averaging 24, 5, and 4.5 on 44% from the field and almost 40% from 3, shooting 38.5. And he's the go-to scorer still. And I really did debate putting Chris Paul in that slot and decided Chris Paul should be one of the positionless All-Star reserves.
Okay, well, it's good you have 2 Suns. I say it's good. I actually don't have 2 Suns on my team. But I have just Chris Paul.
Snubbing Devin Booker like he's been snubbed his whole career.
I know. Well, I looked at it, and I know the Suns are incredible. But you'll see as we get down my list here as to who's left. But I only have the one Sun. I ultimately went with 2 players from the Jazz. I was more confident in that decision.
So I took out Donovan Mitchell for Devin Booker, or I did. Chris Paul, I guess, and you have Donovan Mitchell in place of Devin Booker.
Well, you said, so Donovan Mitchell's 25.5 points per game.
Yeah.
And then 4 and 5 for rebounds and assists. Almost his shooting splits are better. He's 45% from the field, 34 from 3. It's like better than Tatum and Paul George.
And honestly, I'm not sure I can argue that. I'm not sure if you don't have a better argument for Donovan Mitchell than I have for Devin Booker. I feel like I had just already slotted in Devin Booker. So I was deciding between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell for my final spot.
Right. And just to finish off Donovan Mitchell's stat line, he's 88% from the free throw line and 1.6 steals too.
Right.
So it's the same thing. Like ultimately you went with 2 Suns, which I can't argue with 2 Phoenix Suns. They're top of the NBA, but I went with 2 players from the Jazz because I also have Rudy Gobert.
I also have Rudy Gobert. I have Rudy Gobert as one of my positionless reserves.
I completely agree. So Rudy Gobert is far and away. He's like 1.1 rebounds ahead of second place in rebounds, which is Jokic.
Yeah.
So Rudy Gobert 15 boards per game.
Yeah. 71% averaging 16 and 15. And
71% field goal percentage and 2.3 blocks.
Yeah. Rudy Gobert is a defensive monster, and incredibly high like efficiency and a great rebounder. And it's tough to not put somebody with 15 rebounds per game and two blocks in the All-Star game.
Exactly. So that was a clear thing for me. And then, like I said, I'm not even going to argue against you having like Booker. I can't, because the Suns are so incredible and Booker's having another great year. But I'm gonna snub him again for Donovan Mitchell.
I honestly think I might agree with you there. So
I think Donovan Mitchell's started to miss a few games here. So similarly, it'll depend on now who's playing more games, because Donovan Mitchell's at 40, but I know he's been out for a couple games.
Right.
So if he ends up being out more medium term, like I don't think it'll be out long term, then it'll all depend kind of to see if he drops off. But even with 40 games played, I think he's pretty much a lock for me at this point.
Yeah. And I think I hadn't even considered replacing one of my other All-Star players with Donovan Mitchell. I had really just considered between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And I think you have a better argument than I do in that Donovan Mitchell should replace at least one of my Phoenix Suns players.
Well, yeah, the tricky thing, and then we go back to how much does winning count? Because the Phoenix Suns are far and away better than everybody in the league. But the Utah Jazz is number one offense.
And I know Utah was the 1 seed, I believe, at this kind of All-Star game point last year. And like I feel like Mike Conley was gifted an All-Star game just because the Jazz were the number 1 seed.
Yeah, which was wild. He almost won a 3-point contest too until Steph Curry ruined his day.
Mike Conley almost had the best weekend of his life.
But. Yeah, don't even believe you can win the 3-point contest if Steph's in there. Which Clay should be in the 3-point contest, in my opinion. Then go on a little side tangent here.
I really don't care who's in the 3-point contest as long as one Steph Clay is in it.
Send Clay to the All-Star game, not as an All-Star, but like in the 3-point contest.
And so we're left with 3 front court reserves for the Western Conference. Who are your 3?
We have 3 front court reserves. No, because Rudy Gobert's 1.
I have Rudy Gobert as a positionless reserve. So I'm left with 3 front court reserves.
I'm left with 2.
Give me your 2 front court reserves then. Yeah.
Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yep, I have him as well.
Andrew Wiggins.
And I also have him. So you have Wiggins making the All-Star game and not Paul George?
Yes, that's correct.
And why is that?
I don't even have Paul George positionlessly, actually.
So why do you have Wiggins instead of Paul George?
Paul George is only at 26 games played.
Okay.
Which to me, that is, I guess I do care about games played. It just depends. Like, obviously, I'm not arguing that Kyrie Irving at 6 games should actually be an All-Star. I think it would just be funny to send him to Cleveland. But so I'll go Karl-Anthony Towns first. So Karl-Anthony Towns, 24 points, 9 boards, almost 4 assists, 51% from the field, 40 from 3, 80 from the free throw line, 1.1 steals, 1.2 blocks.
Yeah,
so
Karl-Anthony Towns, really, really good.
Yeah,
put him in the All-Star game.
Really good, having a great season. So I have no issues with having him. Which I just like to point out as I'm looking through. Obviously, as Jared and I are talking here, we're both combing up and down the stat sheets. Tyler Hero off the bench has like 20 points per game.
Good for him.
Because he's a 6-man this year, which he kind of flopped last year. Like he had a couple of years ago, he had like when the Heat made the finals run, he had like, wow, like Tyler Hero is going to be the best player to ever play basketball. And then we had like last year, Tyler Hero, yeah, I guess he still plays basketball.
Right.
So we get to Andrew Wiggins. So the Warriors are winning, which is apparently valuable. Andrew Wiggins played 42 games, 18.3 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, but almost 49% from the field, 41% from 3.
Yeah, and you can't really argue the efficiency, but if you're looking at Paul George and you're saying, okay, Paul George averages 6.4 more points, 2.9 more rebounds, and 3.5 more assists.
Right.
So but it depends how much efficiency matters to you.
And I'm going to argue in this situation I value it fairly high because Andrew Wiggins isn't just like kind of efficient, like in the 30s or something. He's really efficient. Like he's 41% from 3 on 20 points per game. So the other guys who shoot the 3 that well are like Joe Harris and Seth Curry, but they don't get the same amount of looks that Wiggins does. But Wiggins, if he's shooting that efficiently, he's doing pretty much all that he can. It's like the points per games that he has, that's like all the points per game he can get because he's hitting his shots at such a good clip. Those are the amount of shots he's getting. He's hitting them at a great clip. So that's what he can do, and the team is winning.
Right, and I'm gonna find a comparison to show you why Paul George should be in the All-Star game. Out of him,
Right.
I just need like 2 minutes.
No, fair enough.
Um,
So then I'll hit a couple of other of my all-stars. Then will you pull that up?
yeah.
So I have Luka Doncic as a guard.
Okay. Yep.
I think that's fairly self-explanatory. That although the Mavs struggled at the start of the season, they've since kind of worked their way up to fifth. Doncic is 25.2 points, almost 9 boards, almost 9 assists. His 3-point shooting is awful. He's 29% from three.
Yeah, and he's a bad free throw shooter too, if I'm not wrong.
75. So not elite for a guard, but not bad for a forward, not elite for a guard.
Right.
But so the thing with Luka is his 3-point shooting is almost detrimentally bad.
Right. Which you can argue, but when you watch the Mavericks, like Luka is far and away the best player on the court 97% of the time, unless you're playing another a team with another superstar.
Right, but Luka is shooting almost the same 3-point percentage as Giannis.
Right, which is detrimental for a guard.
Right, that's what and whether or not you consider Luka a guard, I guess, like he handles the ball all the time, but Luka could play small forward. Right. And especially now, Jalen Brunson, just shout out Jalen Brunson, apparently. He's having a great year. So if you want to say Jalen Brunson's your point guard and then Tim Hardaway Jr. is your small forward or your shooting guard, then Luka's really your small forward, but he's just a point forward.
Right.
So then he's LeBron, basically, like that same style of play, same position setup. Although I guess now LeBron's a center. So, right. But whether or not you put him at guard or forward, he still has a detrimental 3-point percentage.
Yeah, I agree. Luka's got to really up his shooting. I know he's been a average to good shooter in the past, even just like a year or two ago, but you got to be able to hit at a 35%. But
nevertheless, I think obviously at almost a triple-double, he's still an all-star and his team's doing well. So I think he's still, for me, a lock to put on the all-star team, but I just wanted to make that little side comment that he really needs to improve his 3-point percentage or really reduce his 3-point attempts.
So I've officially failed my player to prove you wrong in this situation.
Go for
Bojan Bogdanovic.
Yep.
Why isn't he an all-star? He's averaging 18 points, 4 rebounds, shooting almost 40% from three. He's shooting 39%. Why isn't he an all-star over Paul George?
Sorry, can you give me shooting splits again?
He's averaging 47% from the field, 39.3% from three.
How many games has he played?
45.
No, honestly, like same thing. Like
you would put him in over Paul George.
And that's where it gets tricky. Well, Paul 26 games. Like that's especially if he doesn't play again until closer to the All-Star game, because I don't know how close Paul George is coming back. I think I'm not going to go as far to say that Andrew Wiggins is obviously a lock either, and Bogdanovic apparently having a pretty solid year. But I think because Paul George's games played are so low, that I don't think Paul George is a lock over Wiggins or I guess Bogdanovic.
What about Desmond Bain then, averaging 17.7, 4.5, and 2.5 on 42% from three?
Yeah, same thing. Like I think all of these players you're naming off, I think
you would put over Paul George.
Games, and it depends whether or not Paul George plays more games. But if Paul George stays stuck at, I think I said, what did I say? 26? Yeah, 26 games. So Paul George stays stuck at 26 games until when we get all the way to the All-Star break, then I don't think he's a lock to be on the All-Star team.
Let's assume Paul George comes back from injury and
plays 5 games.
Yeah, 5 more games.
Yeah, sure. Then I could see Paul George being an all-star. He obviously has the stats for it. How are the Clippers doing in the Western Conference, actually?
I want you to quote and say Desmond Bain should be an all-star over Paul George, because I think that'd be a good one.
No. I'm not quoting that he should. I'm saying that Desmond Bain could be an all-star.
Also, update on Paul George's injury. The hope is that Paul George can recover without surgery so that he's available for the end of the regular season in the playoffs. Yeah,
so he's going to be stuck at 26 games. And the Clippers are below 500. They are below 500.
Yeah, the Clippers are not a great team right now.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so I'm not saying Desmond Bain should be an all-star or Andrew Wiggins or Bogdanovic, but I'm saying that Paul George is not a lock to be an all-star because there are more efficient players that have played more games.
Yeah, and I think the games played thing will really hurt him. I think with 26, when we're at 55 or whatever we'll be at when the All-Star actual All-Star announcement comes around, when he's played now around half or less than half this season. I think he's going to get hurt by that. But right now, I think he's an All-Star.
Yeah. Well, and whether or not you want to consider him right now, because the gap isn't as big for the games played yet. We'll have to wait and see on that.
Right.
As to how extended the gap gets before the All-Star break. And especially the voting goes in earlier than the All-Star game does. So the gap might not actually extend that much further.
Yeah, I agree.
So then who do you have left? I only have one player left, and I'll kind of save them till the end so you can go here.
We've covered all of my plays.
Really? So
yes.
Sorry, can you just go through your reserves in its entirety just so I can get the full
My
picture?
reserves are Luka, Devin Booker, who I think I'm going to replace with Donovan Mitchell. So Luka, Donovan Mitchell, Wiggins, Draymond, Karl-Anthony Towns, Chris Paul, and Rudy Gobert. And my 7 reserves.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that does cover everything then.
So who's your last player?
Do you care to wager, I guess? Think about it really carefully. I got one play left. It's a guard because I'm really guard heavy because I prefer guards.
Did you throw Klay Thompson in because he only has 7 games played?
No, wouldn't that be funny though?
Who's your it's a guard? I'm not sure. Throw it out there.
DeJounte Murray.
I really like DeJounte Murray.
I really like DeJounte Murray. He's leading the league in steals, which obviously is phenomenal. And he's a great defensive guard. I would argue he's the best rebounding guard in the league, given the season that Westbrook's having. So DeJounte Murray's 19 points per game, 8.5 boards, 9 assists, 33% from 3, 45% from the field, so not terrible. And then 2 steals.
Yeah, and I guess DeJounte Murray, probably similar to what we were talking about with DeMar DeRozan before, kind of gets lost in the Spurs are boring kind of deal.
Well, and that's
I don't think anybody pays attention to DeJounte Murray, but he is having a really, really good season, even though his shooting splits aren't great. But
and
the stats
the Spurs, sorry to cut you off there, the Spurs are having an awful season. So if you don't want to make DeJounte Murray an all-star purely because the Spurs are 17-29, that's fine. I completely understand. But on my personal all-star team, I would make the choice to put him in as an all-star because regardless of the fact that they're 17-29, he's averaging almost a triple-double, which it's hard to average almost a triple-double if your teammates are bad because it's hard to get assists if they don't hit the shots. But then additionally, like your shootings, if you're a bad team with bad teammates, the best defender on the other team is going to guard you. Your shooting splits are going to be lower because you're taking harder shots, all that kind of stuff, right? So if you picked up DeJounte Murray and dropped him on a better team, then I think you'd see everything bump up a little bit. And then he's definitely an all-star because DeJounte Murray's team is winning.
Right.
So that's kind of where I get it is if you want to argue, Devin Booker's an all-star because the Suns are really good and Devin Booker's really great. I completely understand that. But on my team, I would set it up with DeJounte Murray.
Yeah, and I can for sure see that. So we've been through all of our all-stars for both East and West Conference. I think we agree on 95% of them. We might have 1 or 2 differences in there. Right. But since we've ran a little bit longer than we thought we were going to on that, we'll get to obviously Joel Embiid should be taken in the playoffs over Jokic debate next week. Yeah. Because that's a clear thing, and I'm sure that'll only be 1 or 2 minutes of debate there. But I know you have a tweet of the week. So
it's actually a series of tweets from John Morant. But John Morant has been retweeting that he should be an NBA All-Star. So when other people tweet out hashtag John Morant, hashtag NBA All-Star, John Morant just retweets it, which I don't know if you're allowed to All-Star vote yourself. So I don't know if this is like his way of getting around that, but that means he can't put in the work to type it out himself. Like he's not sitting at halftime being like, whoa, I got 22 points, hashtag John Morant, hashtag NBA All-Star. But he is taking the time to retweet other people saying that he should be an all-star.
Good for John Morant. We love
John Morant. You got to support the cause,
themselves.
right? He supports John Morant supports Memphis, and he's proud to be a Grizzly. And I guess he thinks he's deserving of an all-star, but not enough to actually type it out himself. He's just like passively, like it's a passive-aggressive thing. Like, I'll just retweet it. John Morant, NBA All-Star.
I'm not going to tweet that I should be an all-star, but I'm definitely not going to hide that I should be an all-star.
Right. And he's doing it passive-aggressively perfectly because it hasn't picked up on the mainstream media that he's doing this. We're just quietly talking about it in the Clutch podcast. So I guess he's doing. John Morant's going to be listening to this podcast. And he's going to be like, they get it.
I'm sure John Morant will listen in and know that we support him for supporting himself.
Yeah, which that's all that matters is that when John Morant listens to us, that he knows we support him. Although John Morant, in my office, I have a Curry jersey. If you were able to see the Zoom call right now, you'd be able to see that.
No need to flex on him.
You don't need to flex on me. I'm a Curry fan. Maybe I'll get a Morant jersey down the road. If John Morant wins MVP, I'll buy a John Morant jersey.
And there you go. We got the promise from Drew to buy a John Morant jersey. Yeah. I know the Grizzlies had a day where you could trade in other teams' jerseys for one of, I think it was Jaren Jackson's jersey. So drive down to Memphis, trade in that Curry jersey.
But who wants a Jaren Jackson jersey?
I'm sure a lot of Memphis fans do.
That's almost as bad as getting a Sacramento Kings jersey. You really want, I don't know, Jared, who goes out? I guess you lived in Memphis, but enough to have a Jaren Jackson jersey. Just think about it. If you're going to spend that jersey money, there are so many players that I would get before Jaren Jackson.
Well, it's like if you have a random Jazz jersey from 10 years ago lying around, you can trade it in and get a Jaren Jackson jersey.
I guess that's true.
I'd do it.
It just depends. It's a opportunity cost thing. It just comes down to, is it really worth it to you? And especially got to go all the way to Memphis, which besides the point. Do they take mail-in orders?
No idea. You should call Memphis customer support.
Well, John Morant's listening. He'll just send me a message after.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all we've got for this week on the In the Clutch podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.